They laughed at us, at our teeth, our pain tolerance, our limits. Then they put a human in a box, hungry, injured, alone. And that's when they learned something they were never prepared for. The first thing Michael noticed was the taste of the air, too clean, too fake. It came through a small vent above his head, making a quiet buzzing sound like an insect. His cell was about the size of a large freezer, with smooth, rounded walls that glowed faint green. There were no edges, no seams, just a soft floor and a dark corner for waste. He saw 3 screws in the vent, but they were too far to reach. His arms were tied behind his back with a flexible band. His left shoulder throbbed. An old dislocation made worse 2 days ago. The aliens had barely treated it. They scanned him, popped it back in, and moved on. No painkillers, no comfort. The alien Zirathi, he'd heard one of the transport crews say, seemed fascinated by how tough humans were, but they didn't understand things like rest or comfort. They had laughed at his teeth. Michael remembered the moment clearly. While being examined, 3 Zirathi doctors had looked inside his mouth. Their fingers were smooth, cold, and almost see-through as they gently poked at his gums and teeth, like inspecting a toy. "These are dull," said one. "Blunt, not effective. They can't even clean them without tools," added another. The third, clearly the one in charge, made a soft whirring sound. Michael later figured out that was their version of laughter. Not suited for survival, it said, and yet, they're still alive. Michael wasn't sure what they wanted from him. Intelligence, compliance, demonstrations of biology under duress. All he knew was that he'd been taken from the cratered remains of his convoy on Delaran 4 and had woken up here, cell-bound, bruised, and steadily getting hungrier. 3 days in, the food stopped, probably intentional, testing his limits. By day 5, he started hallucinating. Shadows moved on the edges of his vision, and the throbbing in his shoulder was joined by a sharper pain in his ribs. He'd taken a hard fall during capture point, maybe fractured ribs, and now the left side of his chest hurt when he breathed too deeply. He suspected they'd known this too, and had chosen not to treat it. But what truly got to him, more than the hunger or the pain, was the humiliation. The way they'd laughed, the way they'd dismissed him like he was a pet gone feral. He stared up at the vent. It was oval, half a hand wide, embedded in the wall above the waste recess. The bars were narrow thin, but undoubtedly steel, or whatever alloy passed for that here. No tools, no leverage, just him and his teeth. It started as a joke to himself, a private rebellion. He bit the bar, almost sarcastically, expecting pain or chipped enamel. Instead, it was something else, a jolt, a wild, desperate urge to do something, anything. Day 6. His gums bled a little. The taste of iron, his and the bars, mingled on his tongue. He clamped down again, and again. He lost a molar on the left. It cracked, shooting white agony into his jaw. But it bought him something, the first dent in the steel. Day 7. He slept in fits, waking each time to the compulsion to bite. The gag reflex vanished. Hunger did that. Pain became background noise. His jaw locked around one bar, and he twisted, pulled, bit down with everything he had. His canines chipped, but the bar groaned. Day 8, early. The bar snapped. There was no alarm, no sound at all except his own shuddering breath. Michael stared at the broken vent, blood pooling on his tongue, half his teeth either cracked or loose. He crawled up, wedged his knees against the wall, and used his battered jaw to wrench out another bar, then another. His lips split, his face swelled, his hands, still bound, flailed until he jammed them through the widened vent and, with a shoulder-dislocating twist, got one arm free. He slumped out of the cell vent like a corpse reborn. No guards, just sterile halls and silence. He didn't get far. The first Zirathi saw him crawling, bleeding, face swollen like a ripe fruit. It backed up fast, dropping its scanner and emitting an emergency burst ping. A full team arrived within minutes. Michael didn't resist. He couldn't. He just sat there, panting, mouth dripping with blood and flecks of steel. He was unconscious before they got him back to medical. When he woke up, he was in what passed for an infirmary. Lights were low, instruments humming. A transparent mask hissed oxygen near his face. His hands were free. His jaw had been immobilized, and dull pain flared behind his cheeks, the result of heavy analgesics wearing off. He couldn't move his mouth, couldn't speak. Zarathi medics gathered in a semicircle, speaking softly. One operated a floating scanner. Another tapped through layers of jaw and cranial imaging. The med chief stood silent, its crest lowered in thought. No implants, the medic said. No augmentation. No pressure boosters. No submandibular musculature beyond expected human range. He should not have been able to sever the bar, not with bone. He fractured both mandibular condyles, lost 5 teeth, crushed a molar to powder. How did he apply that force? The med chief turned. It walked slowly to Michael's side, gaze steady. It scanned his face. Then it looked at the images, and finally at the broken bars laid out like relics on the sterile tray. They are not predators because of fangs, it said quietly. They are predators because they refuse to die quietly. Michael couldn't laugh. Not that he wanted to. His jaw was wired shut and every breath still hurt, but inside he smiled. And for the first time since his capture, the aliens looked afraid. Alien dentists laughed at our tiny teeth, until a human bit through steel. Part 2. Michael spent the next 9 days under constant sedation. They didn't dare restrain him again. Instead, they flooded his bloodstream with a cocktail of neuromuscular blockers and mild anesthetics, enough to dull his pain but not suppress consciousness entirely. He drifted in and out, swimming through a haze of half-dreams and muffled alien voices. His jaw had been wired shut with a biofusion plate. A Zarathi surgeon carefully explained through a translation device that his lower jaw had fractured in 2 places. Both condyles, those tiny ball joints that allowed his jaw to pivot, had cracked under the strain. Not surprising, given that human jaws weren't built to chew through alloy. Yet you did, the translator added. You exceeded skeletal failure thresholds. The recovery plan was conservative and rightly so. No food by mouth, all nutrients delivered intravenously, no speaking, no facial stress. A full 6 weeks minimum for bone healing. Then gradual unwiring, possible dental reconstruction, and speech therapy. They gave him access to a touchscreen slate to communicate. At first, he just tapped. Pain, cold, hurts to breathe. The Zarathi nurse adjusted his bed angle and murmured something soothing. Another injected a local nerve block between his ribs. The pain subsided just enough for sleep. By the 2nd week, Michael began typing full sentences. Why am I alive? The answer came in the form of a council session. They brought him into the chamber, still half sedated, seated in a reclined mobility frame, jaw immobile and face still swollen. Around him, 5 Zarathi sat in a crescent, their biosuits tinged with color-coded authority markers. The med chief stood in the center. We have reviewed every scan, every sample, every possibility of artificial enhancement. Michael stared, unmoving. We found no abnormalities, nothing beyond the human norm. Yet you bit through tempered alloy while suffering from multiple injuries, including untreated rib fractures and severe caloric deficit. He typed, I was desperate. Desperation cannot explain the physical outcome. What do you want from me? The council glanced at each other. To understand, the med chief said. How you override your own physical limitations. He didn't respond. There was no answer he could give that would satisfy them. That night, a new Zarathi approached him in the infirmary. This one wore no rank badge, only a slim data tablet and a nervous posture. It introduced itself as Dral, a researcher, not a medic, but from the Biopsych Resilience Division. I don't believe this is about anatomy, Drawl said softly. I think it's about behavior. Something you carry cognitively, not physically. Michael gestured to his jaw and then typed, "Not in the mood for therapy." Drawl didn't laugh. We reviewed your history. You were a combat medic, correct? You once walked 4 miles with a fractured tibia carrying another soldier. Michael squinted at the alien, the memory clearer than he wanted. You passed out in the field from dehydration, woke up and kept working. He tapped. What's your point? You shouldn't have survived those things either, but you did. Why? Michael paused, then slowly typed, because I had to. Drawl sat quietly, watching the lines appear on the slate. They told me humans had weak teeth, he said at last. I think we were looking at the wrong threat. By the 4th week, Michael was walking under supervision. The jaw had fused well, but speech was still impossible. The wires would stay in until a follow-up scan confirmed proper ossification. His ribs remained sore. They had run imaging and determined a hairline fracture in the 9th and 10th ribs. Stable, healing with rest. Pain control was consistent, though they remained conservative with dosage, fearing dependency. The med chief ordered all future restraints on humans to be redesigned. Not stronger, different, more psychological. It cited the incident in a formal report to its superiors. They will endure beyond rational thresholds. We must consider behavioral deterrents rather than physical ones. That same week, they invited him to a demonstration, a cross-species biomechanical presentation held in a hollowed amphitheater surrounded by medical observers. On the table sat a section of the alloy bar he'd broken. Beside it, a jaw model based on human musculature. Artificial actuators simulated pressure points. We tried to replicate your bite, the technician announced. Maximum force output recorded at 1,200 newtons. Insufficient to break the bar. Michael typed, So I'm a freak? No, the med chief said. You are your species. A murmur passed through the observers. What you did should not be physically possible. And yet, when driven beyond endurance, humans enter a state where survival becomes action without threshold. Not reflex, not instinct, a decision. Michael looked at the crowd, all those glassy-eyed creatures baffled by something so stupidly human. It wasn't rage, he typed. It was just not giving up. The room fell into thoughtful silence. By week 6, the wires were removed. A full mandibular CT showed sufficient healing. Speech was slow and painful, and he had to wear a dental retainer to stabilize his molars. Half his left side still felt numb. The Zarathi offered full reconstructive surgery. He declined. I want them to remember what I did with these teeth, he said, jaw stiff. They didn't argue. They had begun a new research line called volitional overdrive models. It was based on what Michael had done, but it went deeper, studying the way human neurobiology resisted shutdown during trauma. No other species in their database displayed the same feedback loops between desperation and physical performance. They kept asking him questions, always circling back to the same thing. How do you know when to stop? And he always gave the same answer. I don't. I just don't. The first time Michael was cleared to eat solid food again, it came with ceremony. Not celebration. Zarathi didn't do that, but a kind of clinical reverence. The nutrition tray arrived, escorted by 3 observers and a researcher with a data stick, already blinking red from active logging. Inside the tray, a small block of softened protein loaf, steamed plant matter ribbons, and a synthetic gelatin dessert. No utensils. The bite test was everything. He flexed his jaw experimentally. Movement came slowly. Muscles protested. His left molars were gone, and 2 right premolars had been reshaped and capped. He opened, closed, bit down softly, then harder, then finally committed to a chew. The observers recorded the sound. It wasn't pleasant. His masseter flared with dull, pulsing effort, and one spot behind his left ear screamed each time the jaw moved off axis. But The food broke down, swallowed. Again, he glanced at the lead observer, who asked, "Does it feel diminished, your capacity?" Michael wiped his mouth. "Feels like it was never about the teeth to begin with." That answer went in the logs, too. When he was fully cleared for speech and light physical activity, they gave him a choice: return to Earth through the interspecies rehabilitation protocol, or stay under study with full accommodations and autonomy within the Zorathi's Central Research Station. He asked what would happen to his data if he left. The med chief answered without hesitation. It would be classified. You would be cited as Subject 723B, no name, no context, merely a data node. Michael nodded slowly. "And if I stay?" "You can oversee your own file, assist in translation, observe how your physiology informs our broader policies regarding humans. You would remain free." He took the offer. Part of him didn't trust that free meant the same thing here, but another part, one still aching from fractured ribs and incomplete dental rows, knew the data could matter. If they were finally taking humanity seriously, he wanted to see it happen. They moved him into a modular living suite. It wasn't luxury, but it had heat, silence, and a real bed. He took walks, spoke to researchers, slowly regained weight. They encouraged exercise, but limited any strength-based regimens. They still weren't sure what Michael's recovery curve would look like. Recovery wasn't fast. His jaw remained stiff on cold days. The ribs took 10 full weeks before he could twist without wincing. And sometimes when he chewed too hard, a residual nerve would zing pain across his face. Still, he progressed. Still, they studied. 3 months after the incident, a small symposium was held aboard the research vessel Carinol, orbiting a diplomatic hub near the Sixian colonies. Michael was invited as a guest speaker, though they labeled him a living artifact of biomechanical persistence, which he found deeply weird. His section was brief, a translated summary of his experience, followed by an open floor for questions. Most were procedural. How did you regulate oxygen under stress? What prompted jaw use over attempted escape through softer infrastructure? Were you aware of potential long-term joint degradation? Then came one from a Yularian diplomat. Tall, blue-veined, more insectoid than mammalian. Would you do it again? Michael tilted his head. If it meant getting out, yes. Even knowing the damage? He didn't hesitate, especially knowing that made it into the closing quote for the session. Later that night, he stood alone in the station's observatory, looking down at the churning plasma storms of the nearby gas giant. Draal approached quietly, bearing 2 cups of a steaming plant-based stimulant Michael had come to tolerate. "You're becoming something of a legend," Draal said. "I didn't ask for that." "I know," the alien said. "Neither did the alloy bar." They both sat in silence for a while. The observatory lights dimmed to preserve contrast. Michael sipped carefully, jaw still not quite right. Draal eventually said, "You have changed protocols across 2 species. Do you realize that?" Michael stared at the gas giant, watching lightning fork through its clouds. "I just wanted out of the cell." "That's the point," Draal said. "You shouldn't have gotten out." Michael turned. "But I did." Draal nodded. "And now every prison that holds a human will remember that." A cycle later, he was asked to consult on a containment project. Not a prison this time. A safety chamber for diplomatic personnel, built to withstand emergent biological threats. The engineers were debating the need to reinforce ventilation systems. He reviewed the schematics. "This one's fine." "Even for humans?" Michael leaned forward. "Especially for humans. If you ever put one in a box again, the issue won't be the steel." They all waited for him to finish. "It'll be, what made you think the box was enough?" Michael stood in front of the surgical-grade mirror, examining the newest addition to his jaw. A Zorathi technician, known only by a numerical designation, Unit 12, adjusted the illumination to highlight the contour of the submandibular ridge where his new molar implant was seated. Bio-matched composite, grown from his own cells over 12 weeks, press-fitted into bone and sealed by neural bond to the surrounding tissue. No risk of rejection, the technician explained. It will respond like your own. Michael opened and closed his mouth slowly, listening to the faint clicks from the alignment sensors. It was smooth, no pinch, no echo of pain. He was officially, finally, done healing. "What's your resistance rating?" he asked. "Within range of natural maxillofacial tolerance," Unit 12 replied, pausing, "though not rated for alloy." "Good," Michael said. "Let's not test that again." The station's medical deck had grown since his incident. More human-compatible chairs, more nutritional options, more ergonomic scanners that accounted for upright posture and shorter torsos. The alien staff no longer treated him like a volatile anomaly, but as a living threshold test. The creature who'd drawn a red line between theory and reality. He sat in on a seminar once, held by Drawl and a cluster of young Zarathi trainees. They called it subcortical override in human pain endurance. Michael sat silently at the back, listening as Drawl described the sequence of neural activations that allowed a human brain to commit to acts of self-harm in service of survival, even overriding built-in nociceptive fail-safes. "Pain is not the limit," Drawl said. "It is a suggestion." The younger Zarathi looked uncomfortable. "Then how do we contain them?" one asked. "You don't," Drawl replied. "You engage them, you reason with them, you give them no reason to see the cage as something to fight." Afterward, Michael cornered Drawl. "You really think that'll work?" Drow lifted his data slate. "With you, probably not. With the next one, we can only hope." News of his escape had spread. The footage, grainy, security-sourced, blood-slick and slow, circulated through black channels first, then surfaced into formal scientific journals, each dissecting frame by frame how a human jaw had taken apart a reinforced alloy structure. Other humans, held in detention elsewhere, started quoting it. A phenomenon called the bite doctrine took shape. Some detainees attempted to mimic him. One, in a Sixian mining hold, broke 3 teeth trying. Another, on a security cruiser in the Nargan system, began using his fingernails to pick out panel seams, quoting Michael's name when finally restrained. That part sat heavy with him. "They think I'm proud of it," he said to Drowl once. "You not?" "No," Michael said. "I was desperate. I was starving and broken and out of options. It was a panic response dressed up in legend." Drowl studied him. "You are the legend now. That doesn't make it true." 6 months after the escape, the Zarathi High Medical Command requested his appearance before their Central Protocol Council. Not as a prisoner, not even as a subject, but as an advisor. The chamber was tiered and cold. Hundreds of Zarathi, spanning disciplines from xenobiology to civil containment, filled the vertical columns, all facing the central platform. Michael stood alone on it, a single chair behind him if he chose to sit. He didn't. "Human Michael," the chair being said, "you have informed a shift in our understanding of mammalian will, biomechanics, and behavioral deterrence. We request a closing summary of your perspective." He glanced up. So many eyes. So many translators blinking softly at their sides. "I'm not proud of what I did," he said, "but I'd do it again." A low hum followed. "You assumed our teeth were decorative. You laughed. You thought we needed claws or tusks to fight. But that's not the point. You're trying to study our biology. You missed the behavior." He paced slowly, hand on his jaw. "You want to know what makes us dangerous? It's not the bone. It's the refusal. The refusal to accept the box, to stay quiet, to die because it's clean and clinical and expected." He stopped. "I bit through steel not because I thought it would work. I did it because it was all I had left." Silence gripped the chamber. The chair being clicked a signal to the archive AI. "Record advisory note. Human containment must never rely solely on structural integrity. Include psychological engagement. Mitigate desperation variables." Michael let out a breath. Good start. When Earth finally negotiated for the release of several captured personnel, Michael was offered transport back, full amnesty, medical recognition, even compensation from the United Nations Interstellar Committee. He declined. "I have work here," he said. The diplomat blinked. "What work?" Michael gave a tired smile. "Teaching you how to keep us from needing to bite at all." His quarters remained modest. The med bay upgraded his implant quarterly. He helped design new recovery schedules for human injuries, grounding them in actual timelines: 6 weeks for bone, 10 for ribs, up to a year for full jaw rehabilitation when stress fractured. But more than that, he gave talks, sometimes to aliens, sometimes to humans. His title shifted: first survivor, then consultant, then simply Michael. He grew tired of the story, but he never stopped telling it. Because the thing that made it matter wasn't the teeth. It was what happened after. After the bar broke. After the blood dried. After the aliens realized that the smallest part of a human, the part they laughed at, had been enough. Enough to get out. Enough to change them. And that, finally, was enough for him.